Trump could be getting his fourth indictment this week. That is right. This time, however, they're text messages. Oh, it's so exciting. So this is the case in Georgia with Fani Willis. And we know over the weekend that two witnesses received subpoenas. That's former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, as well as George Chidi, who's an independent journalist. So this is all sort of a precursor to this Fulton County, or excuse me, this Coffee County indictment. And this is the one that's big, right? You guys remember, this is the one that's like RICO style. Like Fani Willis is going after, who is the Fulton County DA, is going after a lot of people. So kind of the opposite of what Jack Smith is doing on the federal level. So let's look into it. Atlanta area prosecutors investigating efforts to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia are in possession of text messages and emails directly connecting members of Donald Trump's legal team to the early January 2021 voting system breach in Coffee County. Again, a dozen individuals are implicated in this. There's video footage of this, and BT Dubs, this was one of those heavily Republican counties, which was always a head scratcher to a lot of us. So investigators of the Georgia Criminal Probe have long suspected the breach was not an organic effort sprung from sympathetic Trump supporters in rural and heavily Republican Coffee County, a county Trump won by nearly 70% of the vote. They've gathered evidence indicating it was a top-down push by Trump's team to access sensitive voting software, according to people familiar with the situation. Again, weird target considering how Republican it was, but hey, a con is a con. It just seemed like you're barking up the wrong tree, but that's all right. So how did this happen? What's the new information? It seems like in January of 2021, right? So a few days before, the biggie, Catherine Freese, an attorney working with Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and other Trump allies shared a written invitation to examine voting systems in Coffee County with a group of Trump allies. That group included members of Sullivan Strickler, a firm hired by Trump's attorneys to examine voting systems in the small, heavily Republican Georgia county, according to text messages obtained by CNN. That same day, Freese sent a letter of invitation to Coffee County, Georgia, to former NYPD Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik, who was working with Giuliani to find evidence that would back up their baseless claims of potential widespread voter fraud. Freese then notified operatives who carried out the Coffee County breach and others working directly with Giuliani that Trump's team had secured written permission, the texts show. So it's just one weirdo calling on another former dude who was at the NYPD to do the thing and blah, 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 but it's all coming from the top down. It seems like the text messages are linking Giuliani and obviously Donald Trump, and specifically to what we have video evidence of, which was a bunch of people entering this polling station and effectively taking computers out of it. The stuff that Republicans were dying to find Democrats doing, there's actual evidence of. Raivana, I'm curious about your thoughts about the strategy here by DA Fani Willis going after like all of the goons versus just trying to focus on the big goon.
I think it's an excellent strategy. I think that I wanted to see at the federal level more of a wide net cast on who they can implicate, because so many people have been implicated. They've really kept it narrow to Trump and his aides, when I think that there are so many more people that could have been brought in. Of course, a DA at this level, she probably has further aspirations in her career. And I'm not, of course, every DA has that. So, this is probably, she's gonna help use it to catapult herself into a bigger role in the future. But I'm glad that she's doing it in this fashion, because all of these people have tried to undermine our democracy, and I'll say in the dumbest ways possible. Like the least tactful criminals all got together. Rudy Giuliani is like 6 rum and cokes deep at 7 a.m. sending out emails like, okay, it's time to do our crimes. And everyone is replying like, yes, surely now is the correct moment to execute our criminal plan. So, I mean, to an extent, the DA, she has to bring in all these people because it was so absolutely brazen. And I'm glad that she's being less, specific in her targets, because all of these people, like I said, they did coordinate to undermine democracy in our country, and chose the dumbest, not just the dumbest way to collude to do it, but the dumbest possible avenue through which they could try to overturn the election. Like, again, it's just inexplicable that the focus was this one county where Trump won. And I mean, the whole
But I think maybe that was the tactic. It was just like, well, we know we can probably get away with this here because it's the one county where people are so loyal to Donald Trump that they'll do anything. And so even though it doesn't even help us strategically, just do something, right? And I'm sure that was coming from Donald Trump. Yeah, again, raging and throwing his ketchup-filled steak at the wall and asking to find those votes, which we're gonna get into later. But in case you guys needed some refreshing, this was the January 6th hearing that specifically talked about this effort from the top down to actually seize those voting machines. Take a look.
There was a point at which the president said something about, why don't you guys seize machines?
Mr. Rosen, the president asked you to seize voting machines from state governments. What was your response to that request?
We had seen nothing improper with regard to the voting machines, and I told them that the real experts at that had been at DHS, and they had briefed us that they had looked at it and that there was nothing wrong with the voting machines, and so that was not something that was appropriate to do.
Yeah, Mr. Donahue, can you explain what the president did after he was told that the Justice Department would not seize voting machines?
The president was very agitated by the acting attorney general's response. The acting attorney general said that the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, has expertise in machines and certifying them and making sure that the states are operating them properly. And since DHS had been mentioned, the president yelled out to his secretary, get Ken Cuccinelli on the phone.
Right, so that's a bunch of attorney generals and DOJ officials, which, I mean, covering the January 6th hearings, they went on every kind of wild goose chase to please the president within what they felt was legally okay to do. And seizing the voting machines was not one of those things, sadly. Watching a bunch of weird YouTube links, they did it. They tried to follow up on some of the Italygate stuff, didn't bear out. But that one they could not comply with. But it was floated, right? It was floated, and so you know how like mob bosses work. You're not gonna do this for me. I'm gonna find someone who will, and that's someone who will. Rudy Giuliani, this woman, Freese, and Sidney Powell. I mean, Sidney Powell was just ready, born ready. Drunk on life, doesn't need those rum and cokes before 6 in the morning.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.